Hello everyone, this is Ponder on Weather. In this update, we've got a major Arctic blast coming with a polar vortex stretching event as the southern jet stream starts to get active. So we'll break things down for you over the next 7 to 10 days. So let's take a look at the overall setup this morning. You can actually see this ridge of high pressure that's going to be really building over Alaska. That brought the trough down here off the western regions to bringing in all that colder air. We still got the warm sector to deal with ahead of that strong cold front out into our eastern states, and that was the reason why Nicole actually formed and did make landfall as a hurricane into the overnight hours. That is traversing across Florida today with a lot of heavier rains, but we do have some severe weather to contend with. But we also have that strong cold front that's really showing up. In fact, here's some current wind chills as of this morning around 7 o'clock this morning. You can actually see where that cold front is. This temperature gradient is really impressive. That's a 40-degree feels like drop. So once that cold front passes, you're definitely going to feel it. But we still got some severe weather to talk about out ahead of it, as we're still going to be in the warm sector out points eastward. So let's take a look at the satellite setup this morning. You can actually see this massive wind field with Nicole. The eye was like 40 miles wide. It did in fact make landfall around 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock this morning in kind of the wee hours of the morning over Florida. And now that's actually downgraded to a tropical storm, 50-mile-per-hour winds. So it's more or less turned into a rainmaker. But we also have those isolated tornadoes that we're going to have to be concerned about over the next several days coming up the eastern seaboard. But we got plenty beneficial rains that will impact a good chunk of the East Coast with the remnants of Nicole. But we do have some severe weather to talk about ahead of this cold front that will be diving down and really making a big change. And once that cold front hits your house, it ain't warming up anytime soon. In fact, we've got multiple cold fronts over the next 10 days that will come in. But right now, we're mainly concerned about the severe storms that are going to be setting up over portions along the East Coast with the remnants of Nicole. So we do have a slight risk for severe weather, not really for a wind event anymore, not really for a hail event, but mainly for those isolated tornadoes. In fact, we do have a tornado watch that got implemented over the overnight hours. That goes until like 1 o'clock this afternoon, but that will more or less be extended up the East Coast for more or less like Jacksonville, heading up to portions along the coast into Georgia, into South Carolina, as well as North Carolina. Will have to be concerned with those isolated sped up tornadoes. And then out ahead of it, we've got that cold front. So we do have some marginal risk for storms further to the north where some of that activity was pretty active. But further south along that boundary, not really expecting severe weather, but a good, scattered activity back behind that will be trailing the cold front. But as we move into Friday, that tornado risk just lifts further up the coast. Now we're talking into places extending more into South Carolina, North Carolina, as well as into Virginia. That will actually sneak into portions of New Jersey with these isolated spin up tornadoes. So you definitely have to be concerned and keep all eyes aware as this system will be moving up the eastern seaboard by then. So overall, the next 3 days, here's your rain amount. So you can actually see the demarcation line where Nicole will be, essentially kind of right along this boundary. And here's the graph on the left-hand corner of the screen of the depiction of how much rain you're actually able to get. We're talking a good widespread swath of say 1 to 3 inches right along the eastern seaboard up through the Ohio Valley into Pennsylvania. So these areas actually definitely needed some rain, and they're going to get it in a big way. And then we got that little disturbance that's going to be coming across with that cold front trailing back behind that colder air that will be into the next several days. But now let's talk about this Arctic blast. So you're starting to get the initial impacts today over the next several days, but we've got a lot of legs with this system because we look at the overall teleconnections with this, and this is your EPO, this is your East Pacific Oscillation on the ensemble members of the European guidance. Check out this significant drop. This is a pretty impressive system. This will be multiple cold fronts because we got a lot of legs, meaning this all drops all the way down to a -7 deviation, even further than that. So once that cold front passes your house, it's going to continue to drop with multiple cold fronts all throughout next week. And by the time we get to the 17th, say the 18th of November, we're going to see the coldest temperatures by far of the season. So it stays negative all the way through, say, the 21st of the month. So that more or less implies, hey, for the next 10 days, we're going to have relentless cold spells. And I think those will actually get colder and colder with every cold front that does come through. And the GFS is saying the same thing, essentially that -7, even higher than that, like off the charts. So this, both ensembles, both global models on the ensemble member guidance are both congruently saying, hey, we've got a significant cold blast is on the way, and that's exactly what's going to happen. And this is on top of what will be a polar vortex stretching event. You can actually see up here in the stratosphere, we've actually got the Arctic turning a little bit warmer. That sneaks the cold air underneath and more or less elongates this polar vortex. So that'll sneak through the mid-latitudes, and that will help, on combination with that negative EPO, will have push that colder air deeper and deeper south as we get into next week. So let's really break this thing down for you. Here's some overall wind chills by the time we get into Saturday morning. So we still got 2 days of that impact with the warmer conditions out east. But back behind it, once that cold front passes, we got plenty of cold air that trails behind it. And we got widespread 20s waking up in Oklahoma and Arkansas, in the teens in Missouri, widespread 20s for the Ohio Valley, even wind chills down to 25 degrees in Waco, 30 degrees in Austin. So that's some pretty chilly stuff, and by far the coldest temperatures you felt so far this season. And there's plenty more behind that, because by the time we get into Monday, things get active with the Southern Oscillation Index. It starts to go negative. Actually, the southern branch of the jet stream will start to get active. At the same time, we've got that ridging that will start to amplify and really build over Alaska. That sneaks the cold air underneath while we've got successful systems coming in from Alaska, and then the subtropical jet that starts to get active. That sets the stage for overrunning events and pushes the snow line a little bit further south. So by the time we get into Monday, there's your vorticity. So we're not talking severe weather. There's plenty of cold air. Severe weather don't like cold air. So we're gonna be talking, a kind of a chillier rain and actually some snow where it's gonna be cold enough to freeze. So yes, by the time we get into Monday, there's that setup over New Mexico and that lift out ahead of Texas into Oklahoma. And then we have another one that's going to be trailing behind that one, that will be building into the Gulf of Alaska. That will be diving down as well, tapping into that subtropical jet, and that will help amplify even this one back behind this setup. It all sets the stage with the Southern Oscillation Index. This is a leading indicator, and this has been pretty much non-existent with this La Nina that's been having a firm grip since 2020. And we've seen plenty of positive numbers, but the significant impact of this week was these leading indicators when the SOI index actually started to turn negative by the time we got into November the 4th timeframe, and it continued to turn negative and really peaked at that -31 on November the 7th. Now, this is a leading indicator. It's about 10 days out. So that goes to show you the combination with the stretching event that's coming, the EPO going extremely negative, and the SOI turning negative as well. That activates the southern jet stream, and then as those systems come across, that'll pull in some of that the moisture and then wring it out over portions of the south. So there's plenty of breath by the time we go into that Monday afternoon anomalies. We're talking widespread. This is pretty rare, guys, to see the entire lower 48 below average temperatures, while Alaska is well above average, right? So it's completely the opposite. So it displaces all the cold air into the lower 48. on top of the active southern jet stream. So what does that spell? As these systems coming across, the low pressure sets up underneath, we could be looking at a chilly rain in the 40s all day, wind chills in the 30s in Texas. And yes, it might be cold enough to snow in Oklahoma and the Texas panhandle by then, while there's plenty of cold air trailing back behind this with these 1035, 1037 Arctic high pressures. And as we extend the view going into Tuesday, that same vorticity will be setting up over the portions of the Ohio Valley. But then we have another one that's diving in, pulling in more colder air across portions of Utah. And that will be swinging across, wringing out some precipitation. It'll be definitely cold enough to snow again by the time we get into that time frame. Going into the Rocky Mountains, this will extend into portions of Kansas. The Arctic high pressure continues to build and deepen down to a 1042 Arctic high pressure. Now, this is going to be true Arctic air. Now, this is November, right? So we're not talking January or February, but this is a pretty significant cold blast for November. And it's not just one initial blast. These are like successful blasts over and over a period of time over the next 7 to 10 days, that it's going to be a step down process and really amplify the cold and pull that snow line and pull that line a little bit further south, deeper, with every single cold front that will come in throughout next week. So yes, even when we take a look at the 850 millibars, this is about 5,000 feet up at the atmosphere. This has got a lot of legs. It deepens, it pulls with that negative EPO, where, like I showed you, that pulls the funnel effect and pushes the coldest anomalies into the central part of the US. So this has got another extension of some very cold air that's going to be funneling in by the time we get into the middle of next week. And then that same vorticity that will be swinging across, that will pull the snow line further south. So we're talking more snow that could move into New Mexico by then, the Texas panhandle by then. As we got the Southern Oscillation Index turning negative, the southern jet stream gets a little bit more active. We'll have these rainy setups over portions of the Tennessee Valley, getting into portions of North Carolina. But then another reinforced surge that will come in by Thursday with those 10, 15, upwards to maybe 20 degrees below average, which you would typically see this time of year. And then, yes, we have that other vorticity that's going to be coming across into New Mexico again and add ahead of it into Texas, into Oklahoma again. This is based on that really extreme negative 37 on the SOI index with that 10-day lagging indicator. This is the 17th of the month. So that pulls the snow line a little bit further south. We're probably looking at what they call a dynamic cooling type setup by then. By the time we get in that Thursday, would be next Thursday, as the colder air will continue to sink south. It's pretty shallow. It's very shallow air. This will be like model busting cold. Well, it'll be very difficult for these global models to pick on the true depth of this cold going for the next 7-10 days. And even right now, they're not initializing and taking the grip of the cold on the global guidance. They're picking it up on the mesoscale guidance, but you can't see that beyond 84 hours. So, but yeah, we could be looking at some more snow by then in Oklahoma, the Texas panhandle, and dare I even say North Texas could actually even see some little snowflakes starting to fly up in that area. It would be pretty rare for November standards, but you can see the southern jet really getting active further and further south, and that'll pull the snow line further south. So yes, by the time we get into that Friday, the November the 18th time frame, with that low pressure underneath, that will cause the overrunning setup conditions to the north of there. So we could be looking at some heavier snow setting up by then into portions of Kentucky and to West Virginia, getting into Pennsylvania, and that will just sink further north while we have yet a renewed surge of more Arctic air trailing behind that. So this will be definitely by then, the coldest temperatures you have seen by far. And these are feels like temperatures potentially going up to almost -30 below zero, feels like, in a good chunk of Montana and the Dakotas, as those wind chills drop to those single digits in Texas Panhandle and to Kansas. So this is going to be another renewed surge of Arctic air that's going to be trailing behind that. And that puts the snow line further south. So we'd be looking at some heavier snows pulling up the eastern seaboard, as with that SOI drop, that'll traverse this line as that Arctic air will continue to push further south. So yes, by the time we get into the 19th, so this should last at least 10 days at a minimum, with that positive, with that EPO trying to go back to more neutral by then. That will put the P&A a little bit more positive and bring that cross-polar flow by then into the central and eastern 2/3 of the US. But overall, for the next 10 days, I'm going to show you the overall ensemble guidance, put you where the snow line could be. And this kind of gives you a little bit more of a realistic where the snow line could actually reach this far south with that active subtropical jet. So it could actually reach as far south as, say, North Texas, but definitely probably Oklahoma, into Arkansas, into Kentucky, into West Virginia, into Pennsylvania, all those areas, into Utah further north should see some snow over the next 10 days. And the GPS ensemble guidance is basically implying the same thing. So a pretty active spell for the next 10 days with multiple cold fronts over those next 10 days, with an active subtropical jet will spell the plenty of snow as points southward. So things will be interesting, and I'll be fine-tuning this as we get deeper into the next week. So I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely leave your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Catch the latest update where I protect you before and after the storm.